Hello, fellow key searchers. Thank you for joining me again on one of my wacky videos for the Secret Treasure Hunt. I wanted to preface this video by saying that I was inspired by the gift giver's recent clues about how to interpret the various clues within the images so that we can possibly move the game forward. I'm not going to get into that discussion. I'm just going to place it here so that you can familiarize yourself with the premise of this video. And with that, let's just dive right in. So apparently this bookends theory has evolved from this clue within the book that tells us one of the instructions, I suppose, is that a dozen paintings share the clues, yet fairy secrets come in twos. Most of us accept that means you marry one image with one verse and you'll get results. Some people believe that actually means that there are a set of images that are somehow connected to each other or relate to each other or somehow complement each other. So I thought I'll check it out and see what I can find. So come along. So looking at the first images I called the immigrant processing centers, we have the first and the last image, San Francisco and New York. And here are the clues that I believe connect these two. And you can read them for yourself. But let's jump into the image. So image one, most people accept that it is heavily based on Leonardo da Vinci's Virgin of the Rocks, Madonna of the Rocks. However, I wanted to look at why Byron Price chose this painting to, to use for image one. And that's when I found the Great Seal of the State of California. So it represents Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, with the word Eureka above her that literally means I have found it, which I think is very poetic, that it is the first image in the search, in the hunt, and it starts with I have found it, meaning you found gold, you struck gold, you found treasure. With that, I looked at the similarities, and as you can see here, at the top of both images, you have celestial bodies. For image one, you have the moons. For the Seal of California, you have stars. I then looked at the mountainscapes, hillscapes behind the women's heads that are very similar. And then, oddly enough, they both have this strange delineation where you can technically cut the image in half and you would never know that they're connected. Um, so with that, I looked at New York to see how they connect. I could not find any painting, famous painting that might have inspired image 12. So I looked at the Great Seal of State for the state of New York, and lo and behold, more similarities. But I want to mention that uh, at the time of Byron Price, the seal would have only had the word Excelsior, just like in California, we had just one word Eureka. They only had Excelsior, and both actually, I just realized, start with the letter E. Anywho, as you can see here, both have birds with wings extended at the top of the image. Both have these women wearing Greco-Roman clothes with these sashes that drape down from their waist. They both, oddly enough, have jewels at the bottom of their feet, which ties in perfectly with my own theory that the jewel placement within each image is a clue in and of itself. So in the Seal of New York, it happens to also be a clue. It's the women, liberty, and justice stepping on the crown jewels of England, the Kingdom of Great Britain at the time, actually, is what it was called. But again, a strange coincidence. So as I mentioned, I try to find the connection between Athena and liberty and justice, East Coast, West Coast, and that's when I realized perhaps Byron Price was just connecting the cities using these allegorical mythical women. So the next images that I looked at, I call wars that shaped a nation. That being image 2 and image 11. Charleston and Boston, I believe, are connected based on both of those cities being where these major epic battles began, um, as you can see here. So I'll move on to the image. So Charleston, I again tried to find a famous painting that might have inspired the image, and I couldn't find one on all of the various websites, Facebook groups, yada yada. So again, I followed the lead from the previous cities and looked at the state seal for South Carolina, and lo and behold, there were some minor similarities. This one's not as strong, I'll have to admit. However, I have always wondered why that tree branch behind the butterfly goes all the way across the image. The leaves are actual like spruce, fir, uh, pine tree needles. It reminds me a lot of a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. Um, in the state seal, it's actually palmetto tree branches. So the theme is similar, but definitely not the type of tree represented. That said, the arches in the skull map of Charleston um, also appear to be elliptical, like the seal for South Carolina. Um, the goddess in this seal is Spes, which means hope. Um, let's see what else. Um, I then tried to find a real world connection to these palmetto tree branches, pine tree branches, and all I could find was um, the actual representation of the seal itself um, on the Confederate Defenders of Charleston monument that many people believe is part of the puzzle because it's located in White Point Garden, one of the main areas of interest for key searchers in Charleston. Um, so make of it what you will. I then looked at Boston, which is we all know has already been found. For me, I'm one of the few proponents that this image is again in part based on this painting of Paul Revere. I'm not going to go into all the details of why I think they're connected, but you can see clearly, as I've described before, the rosy cheeks. Uh, Paul Revere was a silversmith. The witch in the image has a lot of silver coloring in her dress, gown, whatever. Um, we also have that reflection at the bottom of both paintings that looks like they're reflecting the images, which I think is very unique and odd. And with that, oh, and again, yes, she's supposed to represent a Salem witch. Um, has nothing to do with Boston, but I guess it's just Massachusetts that we're um, being directed towards. And then this is set in a ship setting um, where the window behind her is a portal on a ship. So we know from the artist that told us that that window portal is based on the USS Constitution, as are, and so I looked at more government logos and I found the seal for the Suffolk County where Boston is located. Um, and as John Jude Palancar mentioned, he described the banners on the witches' sleeves to be sigils um, that were intended to represent the signal flags that, as you can clearly see on the USS Constitution and on the Suffolk County seal. And then prepping this for this project, I suddenly realized, wait a minute, I'd never heard that word sigil until I heard JJP say it. And the word sigil is actually on the seal for Suffolk County. So maybe there's a connection there. And so in comparing these two seals, clearly you can see that they don't have a whole lot in common. But I wanted to find out what possible connection they might have, and the only thing I could come up with is, hey, maybe they just represent North and South, as we've all grown up hearing that distinction between the Union and the Confederacy. They obviously both represent the different factions that fought against each other. So the next images that I compared for a possible connection are that of image 3 and 8, Roanoke slash Kitty Hawk, and Houston because of the NASA connection. As you can see, these are the clues that I used to compare them both that you can read for yourself so that I can just dive on into explaining the imagery that might connect these two puzzles. So looking at Roanoke Island slash Kitty Hawk image, um, you can see that we are talking about flight, humanity's mastery of flight. In the verse, various clues tell us that it has had something to do with the Wright brothers. But if we look at the image, we can see that the red part of the scarecrow, as the artist has baptized this painting, which in fact has to do with flight, as it is scaring crows, which are birds, a nuance that maybe people haven't caught before, but most of us agree that this red section of the scarecrow looks like red bird feathers, and as it so happens to be, the cardinal is a red bird and happens to be the state bird of North Carolina. Another possible connection, the town of Kitty Hawk incorporated in 1981 and has the Wright brothers first plane as part of their logo. I believe the scarecrow resembles a Cessna plane because it's very mechanical. The head of the scarecrow is supposed to be Nag's head, which also looks like the front of an aircraft. And the arms being propped up looks like the wings being propped up in a Cessna. I then realized, looking for an inspiration for the painting, and I couldn't find any. So I went to government seals, and I found the County of Dare seal, which actually incorporates what I believe to be a tower window shown in the lighthouse. If you look at the scarecrow painting, you can see that there's nothing in the background but clouds. That leads me to believe that we are high up in elevation, in some tower, castle tower perhaps. Well, otherwise, there would be leaves, trees, something in the background behind the scarecrow. And then another curious comparison point, many people have called out the cross at the bottom left of the scarecrow for a long time, and I realized on the County of Dare seal there is the ship that represents the colonists arriving on Roanoke Island, along with, as I mentioned, the lighthouse and the Wright Brothers Memorial Monument. And to further support this connection, um, the gift giver also made a comment in a previous post mentioning Dare County, which I found very peculiar. Why not say that she believes that a treasure might have been buried on Roanoke Island or in the town of Kitty Hawk, but she specifically mentions Dare County, which is really odd. So then I continued the flight thing to Houston. I've previously done other videos on my theory for Tranquility Park, which is a dedication to NASA, or I should say the city of Houston's helping NASA as ground control. But most people accept that the inspiration for this painting was or is Persepolis in Persia, as that is the theme of this puzzle. Again, for my theory with NASA, I looked at the city of Houston seal that also ties into the image. As you can see, they both represent the Lone Star State of Texas. They both allude to trains and train tracks. And the smoke, and again, in working on this project, I realized, wait a minute, those are smokestacks, plumes of smoke coming out of the train and coming down from the genie. So I see that as the train propelling forward and the genie blasting off like a rocket. And so when we compare these two seals, these actually, like the first two, have a lot in common. I'm calling it the modes of transportation. As I mentioned before, they show a ship, a lighthouse, which is meant to direct ships, the Wright Brothers Monument about the birth of flight, their invention of the airplane, and then the city of Houston with the train and train tracks. So that looks pretty good to me. I would love to hear your thoughts. Lastly, next steps. I'm going to be working on the next three couplings to finish all 12 images. It's a lot of work, so I don't know how fast I can get it done, but I'll try my best. Let me know if you have any comments or questions, and I really appreciate you watching this clip, this video. Thanks.